All right, welcome everyone. My name is Will Moss. I am the CEO of HBCU Connect. And this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you're coming from, we are presenting the Microsoft Office Experiences organization and the team members that have so graciously volunteered their time to share a little bit about themselves, their background, their path to Microsoft, what they currently do at Microsoft. This will be a great opportunity for us to learn about the Microsoft culture as well as the Office Experiences organization culture as well. So we have a great event for you this evening or this afternoon. So we want you to make the most of it. Like I said, utilize the chat to ask questions, to network. We will have a panel discussion as well. So as a part of that panel discussion, I have some questions prepared to ask to the Microsoft team members here that are with us. But then I'm also going to be pulling some of your questions as well, so that you can make the most out of this event by asking those questions that will help you get prepared for a potential interview opportunity with Microsoft. So this is not just a branding event. This is a hiring event, or we hope that this event leads to hires. So we want some folks to get interviewed and hired as a result of this event. Okay, so what I like to do as we kind of jump into the event, I like to go over the agenda so that you all know what to expect at this evening or this afternoon's event. So I'll do a brief welcome for myself, give you a little bit of background on HBCU Connect and our partnership with Microsoft, what leads us to our event today, and how you can make the most of it. All right, so I'll do a brief welcome. Then I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker following a brief video that will give you that high-level overview of the specific organization that is doing the hiring from this event, which is the Office Experiences organization. Okay, so we'll have a quick video, then I'll introduce our keynote speaker, who's Dave Bahal, Principal PM Manager. After our keynote conversation, I'll then introduce the team of panelists from the Office Experiences organization that have volunteered their time. I'll introduce everyone one by one to give you some context on, their roles, their responsibilities at Microsoft. And hopefully, if you know a little bit more about our panelists, then you'll be able to come up with some good questions that you can kind of feed into the chat that I will then ask the team during our panel discussion. All right, so after we've introduced all of the team members, we'll go ahead and start that panel discussion. I'll kick it up with some questions that I have for the team on your behalf as candidates, and then I'll start looking for your questions to come in from the chat so that we can ask those good questions to the Microsoft team members that are here with us today. All right, so that'll be our panel discussion and our live Q&A. So let's make the most out of it. Then we'll talk about next steps in our event ending, and I'll give our final word to our keynote presenter. All right, but in those next steps, like I said, we want folks to get hired from this event. We've gotten lots of hires from our past events, so you are in the right place at the right time. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, quick, brief overview. A lot of you probably have heard from me in the email announcements about this event. We've been doing events with Microsoft over the last 8 or 9 years. Originally, these events came from a concept and a conversation that I had with a Microsoft team member that brought us on to partner. We were doing online recruitment, online job postings, resume database access for Microsoft, a lot of online activity, right? He came to me and said, "Hey, Will, this is great, but Microsoft is huge, and we get, millions of people that want to work for Microsoft that submit applications online. We see you all are sending, more and more African-American applicants to our website, but we want to make sure that your candidates get a good look from our hiring managers. So what can we do?" So I met with my team. We came back with the idea of doing exactly what Microsoft asked for, and that is, let's introduce your hiring managers, your recruiters to our talent, and let's do it in an event format. My ask was that Microsoft would invite some of the diverse team members that are not only in the jobs that they're hiring for, but also in leadership positions as well, to come and mix and mingle and share their experience having worked at Microsoft and share the Microsoft culture with our audience and our candidates. So we started doing events, like I said, about 8 or 9 years ago. Fast forward to 2020, lots of folks have been, getting hired from the events, but COVID-19 hit. So now we decided, instead of canceling the events, kudos to Microsoft, we are actually continuing to host events. We're just doing them online and virtually. Coincidentally, the first team at Microsoft to trial our virtual event process was the Microsoft Teams organization. So we used Microsoft Teams for the event, and it's been going well, ever since then. But we've continued to do these events over the last couple of years. We probably had 40 or so hiring events with Microsoft. So my point is that Microsoft is serious about diversity. Microsoft is serious about hiring from these events. Microsoft is not only investing time into this event, but they're also bringing their employees to this event to share their experiences, to answer your questions, and get you excited and as well prepared to potentially interview for the hiring organization. So that's what brings us to this event this evening. Like I said, this is not just a branding opportunity for you to learn more, but this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, to prepare for a potential interview, to take some notes, to update your resume, to get it over to us, for us to then share with the Office Experiences organization. All right. So that is the opportunity here for you tonight. Like I said, plenty of people have been hired into Microsoft from these events and into the Office Experience organization as well. So let's make the most of this evening's event. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start it off with a quick video to give you some background. And what I want to do is I'm going to reshare to make sure I share my sound real quick, because I don't know if I did that. So share computer sounds. All right, here we go. I'll look for some thumbs up from my Microsoft team members for the sound.
The impact that technology is having on the world is greater than it's ever been.
Especially in the days of COVID, hybrid and remote work, a huge set of opportunities for us to define how humankind uses computers.
We would love for you to come be a part of our community and enrich the lives of people all over the world.
Opportunity here is nearly endless, and that's why I am part of OXO.
OXO, or the Office Experience Organization, is responsible for the core experience of Office. And that's across these apps that you know incredibly well, like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and tons of technologies that light up across the entire Office suite.
Designers, engineers, program managers, data scientists, we are focused on delivering productivity tools and empowering people to achieve their best in their workplace and in their homes. The office that we are now working on is highly collaborative, highly connected to cloud, powered by a number of different services. It has artificial intelligence built into it. We use data analysis and machine learning for improving the engagement of our customers with Office. All of these modern trends, from cloud computing to edge computing, are encapsulated in what we are doing and what we are driving forward, trying to improve the productivity and the ease of use for the humankind.
There are 4 main teams in OXO: Calc, Canvas, Fuel, and Shared. The Calc team has at its heart Excel, wildly popular, really well regarded. But that team does a lot more than simply build Excel. They define the Office platform that's used across all the Office apps. There's AI technologies that we're building in Calc that we use to recognize real-world entities.
It's a team which is focused on calculations and really understanding, wrangling, and analyzing the world's data.
We're helping students and teachers and average people collect information using forms and then process and analyze those in Excel and other apps. The Canvas team is responsible for 2 of our flagship apps, both Word and PowerPoint.
Canvas is at the forefront of some of the product innovations that we drive across Office, with machine learning and artificial intelligence and collaboration across all of the different authoring experiences that we have. Our Fuel team is a team responsible for a number of different missions.
You might be measuring the effectiveness of our deployment in large organizations on one day, driving growth of Office to consumers through an upsell from free web apps to rich apps another day, and then on a third day, helping to improve Microsoft and all of our employees' engineering system.
So important mission for our Fuel organization is to deepen the trust between our products and Microsoft and our customers. Customer trust is a very important part of our mission.
The Shared team is one of the places that we do a lot of innovation that we're going to bring into apps in the future. Our Fluid technologies are a great example of this. Fluid is an entirely new way of creating collaboration and connection between people in any application.
We run obviously on Windows, but we run on a Mac, iOS, Android, on the web. And big responsibility of the shared team is to deliver the components which span all of these different platforms. We have hundreds of millions of customers using our products on a daily and monthly basis. Hundreds of services and microservices delivering the experiences that we build. Our code base comprises for hundreds of millions of lines of code with no exaggeration, which we then have to build and release effectively every day.
It's possible to have an incredibly diverse and impactful career, all while being at the same company. And it's true, we've changed a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. And one of the things that we like to say is that we want to not be know-it-alls, rather learn-it-alls. We want to have an open mind. We want to be curious and interested and express our ideas as hypotheses to be tested. We really understand that there's a wide range of people out there with different backgrounds, different work styles, different things they're dealing with in their everyday lives. We have robust employee resource groups to help everyone find a community that they feel a part of, to broad training of our employees, to simply talking about inclusion as a core part of who we are as a company and about the culture that we want to create.
We need to obviously represent the audience that we are trying to empower. And so we operate in a number of different countries. It is all about bringing a diverse set of people and diverse thinking together to build products which our customers love.
The Office Product Group is an amazing organization, and now is an amazing time for you to be a part of it and enrich the lives of people all over the world.
So they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so a video must be worth 1,000,000. Awesome. So with that being said, hopefully that, let's get that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of a little bit about the organization. So this is the organization that is behind this event. This is the organization that is going to be doing the hiring from this event. So super excited to present to you not only the panelists, but our keynote, who is Dave Bahal, Principal PM Manager. So Dave, if you'd like to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background on maybe your path to Microsoft and what you currently do at Microsoft.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me at this event. I really appreciate it. My journey to Microsoft and tech has been a really roundabout way of getting here. So I started out, I originally, after high school, I went to the military. So I was in the military for 4 years. Got out of the military. Military paid for, you get a college fund. So I took that money and I went to South Carolina State University, which is an HBCU. I graduated from South Carolina State University. I have a BA, as you can see, not anything tech related, in English and history from SC State. And so I graduated and I became a school teacher my first 2 years out of college. But I always knew I wanted to be in the tech field because back in the day, I'm going to date myself, there was this movie that came out called War Games. And it caught my attention. That's with Matthew Broderick, and they hacked the Department of Defense. And ever since I saw that movie, that was going to be, I'm like, yes. And later on, I went out to this yard sale and I caught me a Commodore 64 from this yard sale. And it started my journey. And so I did this, but I chose to do English and history in college just because it's something that I love. I was intrigued by that, but I knew that I was going to be technical. So I became a school teacher, and then I knew the path to get into IT at that time, which is the early 2000s, was to get an MCSE. Again, I'm dating myself. That's a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer certification. So after work, when I was a school teacher, I used to lock myself in Barnes and Nobles, get off from work as a school teacher at about 4 p.m. And I wouldn't leave Barnes and Nobles until about 12 a.m. studying, because I think it was 8 tests. It was a while ago. Studying, and boom, got my MCSE. And then I was hired as a land administrator, Active Directory administrator for Western Union / First Data Corporation. First Data, their financial processing company. Basically, when you swipe your credit card, they're the middleman in that transaction. At that time, they still used to own Western Union. They're two separate companies. And so I was hired there, and I became an AD admin. And Microsoft reached out to me and asked me that I want to write about what I did every day. And they explained to me they were reaching out to field professionals because they wanted folks in who are used to what back in the day we called these dirty environments, meaning you had Oracle, you had Microsoft, you had Novell back then, you had Lotus Notes. I'm dating myself. You just had all of this all in one place, pretty much before the industry settled down to being on-prem, Microsoft centric, as we would say now. And I said yes. And so we moved from Colorado. Microsoft moved us from Colorado to here. And I was a technical writer for 3 years or so. And then I became a manager of the team. And then I said, I want to become a software engineer. So I did what I did to become an MCSE. I locked myself in Barnes and Nobles, studied. I did have background in scripting and everything because as an AD admin, you have to do scripting for folks, log on scripts, home folders, batch file stuff, again, dating myself and all those things. But I said, hey, I think I can do this. So locked myself in Barnes and Nobles, Code Academy online. There was this thing called Code Academy online. I did that and I took a local class. We have this thing in Seattle called Bellevue Community College. Everyone should take advantage of it. It's a great place. A lot of the instructors are from Microsoft who are there. And so I took a Python course, blah, blah, blah. Went to an interview and I passed. I got turned down a lot. And that's the thing I want to really, really stress. You will get turned down a lot, but make those into opportunities and just keep fighting and fighting and fighting. Then after I did software engineering for like 3 years, I said I wanted to try program management. So I went out and set about learning how to become a program manager. And I shadowed one of the folks that we had on our team who was a program manager to understand what the day-to-day activities look like, what's expected, what is the actual difference between PM and engineering, how to work best, together. Took those learnings and I interviewed for a job on the SQL team. And that was my first PM job. Was for the SQL team. Did that for about 3 years, decided I wanted to go back into content publishing because, again, my degree is in history and I still get to dabble in the technology. And we have what we call programming writers here. So you can actually still code and write at the same time. You write code samples. And if you ever get a chance and you go to this site called docs.microsoft.com, you'll see that documentation that kind of touches the world. As you can see, I get antsy. I decided again, I wanted to do something else. So last year, someone reached out to me and said that they have an opening on the identity side of the house for OXO office products. Identity is my background. That's what I've done since day one. Even when I came to Microsoft, I wrote about it. I've always been identity focused. And so I came over to the team interview, got that job, and then I became the manager of the team. And so our team here, we are product managers. We work closely with, I'm pointing on the screen with Rohit's team there, but we are responsible for the authentication, secure authentication and authorization process through OXO's suite of products, WXP. It expands beyond that because we get into kind of everybody's deal, but that's our base core. We are shared. So the authentication mechanism that we work on is shared amongst the Office suite of products.
Awesome. So one of the takeaways from your story, and I want to kind of ask you to share your insight on this, but one of the takeaways is when you wanted to try out a different opportunity or a different role within Microsoft, you didn't have to move to a different company to do that. So how hard or easy was it? Because it sounds like it was easy for you to do that, right? You just had to prepare and then look for that right opportunity. How easy or hard was it to make those transitions to different roles within the company?
So I would say it's it's not, when you're changing full disciplines was the hardest. Like becoming the software engineer is a full discipline role change. And for all of the folks we have in our wonderful Microsoft panel here, that was the one that required the most. And I skipped over a lot of, you gotta want it, right? And so to change a discipline, to change something else, you have to sit down, you have to study, you have to look for opportunities, you have to network. There's just a lot of, you have to take advantage. The big takeaway: take advantage of the opportunities that are given to you. They don't come around very often, and you got to snatch them when they come, and just kind of take advantage of it and keep on keeping on. Have cup is half full instead of half empty, and take your nose as opportunities and kind of keep on pushing. But the wonderful thing about working at Microsoft, back to what you asked there, is you don't have to leave the company though if you put in the groundwork to change roles, to explore different things. We have a huge business. Say you come in on the technical side and you want to now say, I want to do business administrator work. Hey, you take advantage of the opportunities we have in our benefits package. You go to class, you could go move over into the benefit side. To the business side. Or if you want to do HR, we have just a big company, and we are always, one thing that I can say is that even before we had these type of events, because I wasn't hired through any of this is great to see that we have something formal in place, and there's now a pipeline that looks like that we're trying to develop. But the big takeaway is just to keep on and just push and look for those, different opportunities. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because you can't be. All they can do is tell you no.
Love it. Love it. Sound like you'd be a good mentor for a lot of folks there at Microsoft. Quick one. Okay, so South Carolina State University, are you currently located in the Pacific Northwest?
Yes, I am.
So can you tell us the story about how you ended up from South Carolina to the Pacific Northwest, and how did you adjust as an African American, going from the South to the Pacific Northwest?
Okay, yeah. So I started off in Baltimore first. So that's why I say originally I lived in Baltimore until I was 12 or 13 years old. And then we moved to South Carolina. Okay. And so my little trivia fact is I've lived in every time zone in the continental United States for more than 2 years. Wow. And so that's one of the things that I've done. And so at South Carolina State, my wife, actually, it's a crazy story. My wife was the math engineering major. Okay. She was recruited by MCI, which is now Verizon, right? Yeah, I think so. WorldCom, MCI. Yep. To be in software engineer field. And they hired her, and she moved us to Colorado, and I was the school teacher. So I moved and I was the school teacher. Now let's flip it. When we're in Colorado, she wanted, we talked about, what we wanted to do. She wanted to become a school teacher. I wanted to be in information technology. So we flipped. Now we're here, and she's a school teacher at Beaver Lake Elementary School over here in Sammamish. And now I'm at Microsoft as as a product manager. So that's how we actually got here. She moved us to Colorado. I moved us to Seattle. As an African American, I won't say it was, it has been very difficult. I would say it's all about what you make it. I would say you have to be very careful about how far down you want to go, like what I call the victim route. I don't know if that's a good word to say, but just don't look at it like that. Just kind of keep on keeping on. I guess my head has been down so much trying to look for opportunities, raise my family. I have a wife and 3 kids. And so I don't know. I never really thought about that. I'm like, if I could take care of home, whatever else is, kind of, it is what it is at that point. I'm like, my favorite dude is Tupac. And so when I listen, I take hip hop and I apply it to regular life and IT. And so when he said in Juice, put the wind behind your back and take advantage of the opportunities, you got to do it and go out in the blaze. Now, you don't go out in the blaze and get shot, but you go out in the blaze like, hey, I'm taking my shot. And if it happens, it happens. If not, then, hey, nobody can tell me I never tried.
So I got to ask you a quick question about the Commodore 64. It's funny because at a lot of our events, when we talk about how folks got started, that is like a catalyst machine from back in the day. That's how I got started in software engineering. Did you have to write programs in order to use that Commodore 64 back in the day?
Yes, basic beginners all-purpose symbolic instruction code. That was my first thing I ever learned in technology, is what BASIC stood for. My first lines of code: 10 print David Ann, 20 go to 10. What that would do was print your name in a loop through the screen, and that's the first thing I ever did as far as my first 2 lines of code was to see my name repeated on the screen. Yeah, so yeah.
Love it, love it. So quick
It
question.
was boot to just that cursor, and you had to create your own experiences.
Love it. So quick question for you. This will be a question that I ask each of our panelists as well, because I love to get sometimes themes, right? Common themes, but then I also like to get what's unique to each individual. So for you personally, what is it that you like most about working for Microsoft?
Knowledge. Being able to learn. You are around some very, very smart people. You are around some of the smart, you're around some of the smartest people in the world.
Yep.
And if you take advantage of those folks that you meet and get out the shell and take the opportunity, you can gain so much knowledge around, because Microsoft, as you well know, is a leader in the software industry. And so you can find out just new movements, what's happening, things to pique your interest. So yeah, it's my biggest thing is knowledge, and that's always has been what motivated me. Is, like I said, I'm a product of that 80s, 90s hip hop, and self-destruction, all of that, wearing the African medallion, having the clock, knowing what time it was. I was all into that X-Clan, Public Enemy. And so, yeah, to me, it's about, getting that knowledge.
Awesome, man. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask a question for all of our candidates that have like a PM background. What is it like to be a PM at Microsoft? And any advice you would give to our PM candidates out there that are, because I know that's very competitive, to get into a PM position at Microsoft. But I know there are folks that really want, that opportunity to get their foot in the door. Any advice you might give, and what is sort of a day in the life?
Yeah, so I would say a day in the life of a PM role is, one, you work closely with your engineering team, and you are responsible for, developing and driving features that are conceived by someone else, conceived by yourself, conceived maybe just in some kind of think tank somewhere as part of a hackathon of some sort. So what you do is you basically take the voice of the customer and understand what it is that the customer is trying to achieve with X feature. And then what you do is collaborate between all of the teams that are involved, get those requirements in, get you I always like to start off with a nice 1-page spec about what it is that we're trying to accomplish, that 20,000 foot view. And then in that spec, outline all your players, your partners. And then being very collaborative is the biggest key, and understanding who your stakeholders are, communicating, never being afraid to say something is not on track, because it's not your fault if it's not on track. What has happened is we need to help you as a manager with more resources, or there are roadblocks that we did not encounter. So don't be afraid that, tell us you're red, because it's not your fault. You're working amongst the team. So those are the type things, is just remaining collaborative, take very good notes, understand your engineering team, understand how they like to work, and then just checking in, attending the scrums, and just keeping things on track until that final release hits. And then gathering that feedback as well to take in feature requests for improvement as you move along.
Awesome advice. Love it. So Dave, let me thank you for being our keynote, and I'll ask you to hang on for our panel discussion a little bit later. All right, but with that, let me go ahead and start to introduce our different team members that we have representing OXO with Microsoft. Okay, so the first team member I'd like to introduce is Thomas Moore, Principal Software Engineering Manager within Word Core. originally from St. Louis, Missouri. So Thomas, if you're ready.
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Greetings.
And so as the slide says, yes, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I'm actually working remotely from as well, which we could talk about working remotely at some point later on too. I'm originally from, I went to college at Washington University, which is also in St. Louis. And I didn't take as, I guess, the winding route that Dave took. I went straight to school to get a bachelor's and master's in computer science, and then jumped right into software engineering after I graduated from college. When I started at the company, I joined Internet Explorer team, which is another relic from the past at this point. As part of that team, I was part of building the web platform. So a lot of the things now for any of the web developers in the crowd, if you're writing web apps that are using APIs that interact with the DOM or get information from the layout or send or receive information across the network or read stuff from the file system, all of that kind of stuff are things that my team was involved in, and I built several features for that. I was on that team for 10 years as IE became Edge. And after that, I left the company for a couple of years and went to Mozilla. And at Mozilla, I did mixed reality research. One of the features that I worked on during my time at Edge was to help build virtual reality capabilities into the browser. And then an opportunity came up at Mozilla to do the same thing. So I went there for a couple of years, and then a little over a year ago, came back to Microsoft to join the Word team where I am now. And within Word, I am responsible for, my team is responsible for improving the experience for multiple people editing a document at the same time. So sometimes I tell people that they don't even know that you can actually do that. So yes, if you have Word and if you have a document that is stored in OneDrive, you can actually invite other people to collaborate and edit the document with you at the same time. And my team is responsible for building that.
Awesome, awesome, and very impressive. So I got to ask, as a software engineer, how did you get into software engineering or decide to go into software engineering in the first place?
Yeah, so I am very fortunate to have had some examples as a young Black boy of people who use computers. So my aunt, one of my relatives, has a degree in computer science. My father, who is not a computer scientist, but he's a musician. And as a musician growing up, we always had computers in the house for recording, for sequencing, for writing sheet music, whatever it was. So like well before everyone had computers, let alone more than one computer in their house, I was able to, I guess, be exposed to it. So over time, I became, because of that exposure, as I grew up, I was like the computer guy in the circles that I was in. And that, I guess, a virtuous cycle. I just became more interested and then got more exposure, more interested, more exposure. Until eventually in high school could take a few classes in programming. And from there, decided to take the jump to major in computer science in college. And then the story goes on from there.
And the rest is history, right? No,
Yeah.
I think that's always interesting, right? Because we have a lot of folks that have backgrounds, in software engineering or computer science, and sometimes that story resonates, with a lot of us. So, what is a day in the life like for you as a principal software engineering manager?
So as a manager, I guess in many ways, I'm trying to help people do the work that I would do if I was not a manager, right? So as with the people who are reporting to me, like we have like a set of work that we're responsible for. And as a manager, it's my job to like find work that is interesting for everyone on my team to do, as well as to help them succeed in it. And so that could involve like unblocking them when they get stuck on a problem, helping them think through solutions. Sometimes it's introducing a new tool to solve a problem. And sometimes it might be just introducing them to somebody else who can do it and I can't, right? And so over time, right, like I'm responsible for helping to groom and develop and raise up more engineers so that we can build more features and introduce more, I guess, impact into the product and the company.
So can you talk a little bit about what your team looks like? So like how many folks are on your team? What kind of backgrounds or technologies are they working on? And as a software engineer, I'm sure lots of folks are going to wonder what type of technologies should we know coming in the door, or what do you look for? You know, as
Yeah,
you build.
yeah. So my team is relatively small, and we are, I guess, based out of the Atlanta office. So and we're growing, right? Like with our team and a lot of other teams that are based in Atlanta, we're relatively new, and so different from a lot of other teams at Microsoft, we don't have any college hires yet. And so most of the people who have joined this team in the last year and a half are people who came from industry, like who had some kind of previous professional experience before joining the team. And so with, sorry, and so with the technologies that are involved, for my team specifically, the code for Word and most Office apps are written in C++. And in some ways, a little bit more C-like in the way that it is expressed. And that's because Word is probably older than almost everybody in this call, right? Back before we had a lot of the modern languages that we have today to build software. But as Word continues to evolve, like you are starting to see new languages being used, such as like C# or newer languages. Like C# that is used for a lot of server-side components. And some of the more, I guess in the video, it talked about Fluid, which is a new component that's used for co-authoring and collaboration. That's written in JavaScript. So there are a lot of languages that can be used. And even though it's not product development, we do have some languages that are used for analyzing data. That includes Custo, which is kind of a sort of derivative of SQL, depending on how you think about it. But just thinking about like, what would you do to like create queries with your database language? It's kind of similar to that, except for just way bigger stores of data.
Okay, so I'm going to ask my favorite question. For you personally, what is it that you like best about working for Microsoft?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have never been bored the whole time that I've been at the company. Like, there's always something to do, sometimes too much to do. But for me, that's really, really satisfying, right? To know that there's always some kind of hard problem to work on. And no matter what I do or where I go, there's always more, right? Like there's something to grow, something to challenge me. And so, yeah, that is, and so I've been here for, I guess, almost 12 years now. And still, right, I'm still learning, still having to learn new things to accomplish new things.
Awesome, awesome. So Thomas, let me thank you for being one of our panelists.
Yep.
I'll ask you to hang on for our panel discussion after I introduce our other panelists.
Great.
Thanks. Okay, so let me introduce Hari Shin, who's Principal Software Engineering Manager as well. So Hari, if you're ready.
Hello, I'm Harry. I was originally born in South Korea. My family live in Busan, South Korea. Currently, I live in Seattle. I graduated with a computer engineering degree and double major in economics from Northwestern University. I've been with Microsoft now surprisingly 10.5 years now, almost hitting 11 years. So time kind of flies by. I guess going back to like how did I got into Microsoft? So my junior year at college, Steve Jobs announced an iPad to the world, and in my mind, at the time I was using only like Linux and Windows, and I was just like, why on the world would people buy iPad? Like that makes no sense to me, and it was expensive too. Just like made no sense. And then in my senior year, I got invited for university recruiting interview, and my interview group was Apex, and Apex is an Apple productivity experience team, so they only work on Apple products at Microsoft. So me, who doesn't even get iPad and never worked on anything Apple, I don't even know how to use Apple, and I told HR. Microsoft HR, like, this is a mistake. Like, why am I interviewing this team? Like, I will not do well. Like, and I was more surprised when they gave me an offer to actually work at Microsoft. Like, oh, I don't belong in this group. Like, I'm gonna immediately get fired on my first year because I'm not worthy of this team. And then 10 years later, I'm still here. Now I'm officially converted to Apple fanboy, so everything in my household is Apple. Sorry, if you ask me Windows question, I can't answer any of them. I'm calling in from my MacBook Pro. That's where I am. So previous roles at Microsoft, I was an individual contributor. That's what ICs I meant. I was a software engineer since college. I used to be on the OneNote Apple team, so we were the team that we first introduced OneNote iOS app and then OneNote Mac app, which we released it. And then I moved to the Apex Share team, which is again the shared components for all the apps called Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Mac, Visio, all those kind of stuff. So I was an IC role there, and now I'm the manager in Apex Shared. My team does a lot of the open source stuff for Fluent Initiative. The best way to describe it is like if Google has Material.io, Microsoft has Fluent. We have our own design system, and we are building the open source framework to build microset opinion design frameworks in the world and integrate it to all the different Microsoft apps. So that's what I own.
So I love your story and the transparency behind it. So I got a good question, because I can imagine there are some candidates that could have that same mind frame that you had when you interviewed. So what is it that you think Microsoft saw in you during your interview process that made them extend the offer?
I think if I look back, I think most of my friends and my colleague would say I'm a very transparent person, and I will cut through all the BSs. And I think I have also demonstrated that during my communication skills during my interview. I think the second thing, like I was very honest that like I never done Apple stuff. Like, should I really be interviewing? And everybody was like, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. You'll come and join and learn. And like I didn't believe him, but like now as a manager, I tell that to everybody else too. Like, yeah, it's okay. We look for smart people. We're looking for smart people who are willing to learn and grow. And so yes, like if you have Apple background, like that will be cherry on top of the cake. Like I would definitely love you if you have that kind of experience. But if you don't, that's okay. I'm more willing to see the passion that you have and the smart and like willingness to grow and learn, and like and our team exists because we're here to support you and empower you to grow in that direction. So
love it. So speaking of your team, what does your team look like? So like the size of your team and the composition of your team, like what kind of people do you have on your team working on what?
So currently I have 10 people in my team, and I'm trying to grow more. And I would say I'm split into the middle. Like, so 5 people on my team is like actively working on native stack versus like 5 people who are actively working on the React Native stack. So the ultimate goal of my team is to make awesome Apple UX controls no matter what tech stack is. Like, so we're very customer focused. Like Apple users, when they use Microsoft apps, like we don't want to look like Windows, we don't want to look like Android. It should be really Apple experience. The technical solution we bring to the engineering team should be it shouldn't matter whether or not it's Swift UI versus React Native, which is mostly JavaScript. So so my team is focusing on building that platform.
So Harry, my favorite question. What is it for you specifically that you like most about working for Microsoft?
For me, I think it's the people. I say this to a lot of people where my family is in Busan, South Korea. I see them maybe once a year, COVID, maybe once every 2 years. But I spend 8 hours a day working with my colleagues all the time. So I really need to enjoy the people that I work with and the community that I work with. And everybody is like talented, supportive, and like we're all rooting for each other's success rather than like competitions or any kind of stuff. So the people really draws me into Microsoft.
Love it. Love it. So Harry, thank you for being one of our panelists. with that, I'm going to ask you to hang on for our panel discussion, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Thanks, Harry. Okay, so the next person I'd like to introduce on the team is Marissa Hellerson, who's a software engineer 2, Office Platform Core. So Marissa, if you're ready.
Hi, folks. My name is Marissa, and I have been at Microsoft for 7 years. I work on the Office Platform Core team. We were kind of highlighted in that video, which is kind of fun. We're under Calc, but I don't work on Excel. And so my path to Microsoft is very windy and very different. I like to look at it as a series of people taking a chance on me, because that's really what it was. So I dropped out of school in 8th grade to help take care of my little sister, and paused for a long time. So when I turned 18, I got my GED and started to go to community college, and I had a lot of math to catch up on, having never taken a high school course ever. So fast forward a little bit, I'm in community college. I find an engineering professor comes to my elementary geometry class and tells us we can be engineers. And I'm like, this guy is crazy. He has no idea what he's talking about, but he seems cool. So I talked to him, and I took an engineering physics course after I got through calculus. And he was great, and he was one of my biggest mentors my whole life. So, I was working on engineering physics and loved it. I got accepted into University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign into the engineering physics program. And so I went my first semester and took 3 physics courses, a 400 level math class, and I rounded it out with a computer science 125. I failed everything but computer science 125. And it was like the biggest slap down I have ever experienced. And it humbled me a lot because I had always been an A+ student since I went back to school. And I met one of the professors in the CS department who encouraged me to keep going. She's like, you really have a knack for this, and seems to come pretty naturally to you, and I want to support you. And so, I tried to get into the department, and I got declined, and they told me to retake the classes and get A+ instead of just a B. So the next semester, I retook all the courses that I needed to try and get into the department. Finally got in by the skin of my teeth. And then, I was one of the very few Native students in the engineering college. So I joined the American Indians in Science and Engineering Society and went to a national conference where one person from Microsoft came. Back in the day, we only had like 1 or 2 people that came. And so I met somebody from Microsoft, and he and I were from the same tribe. And so we had some great conversations, and it worked out really well. And then I had some other interactions with the Microsoft recruiter through a hackathon that I ran at my university. Got turned down for a ton of roles, got turned down for a Microsoft internship. I had a internship as a project manager at Groupon, which I don't know if anybody remembers what Groupon is. I think it might still exist, but that was back in Chicago. And I was there for a summer, and they gave me a full-time offer to come back. And the Microsoft recruiter had given me a scholarship my senior year. And so he was like, with this comes an immediate interview for full-time roles. And I was like, this guy's done a lot for me. And so I'm going to go out and humor him before I accept my Groupon offer, because there's no way I'll get a job at Microsoft. I've gotten turned down from 10 other tech companies because I had only been in CS for 2 of my 8 years in college. And the guy who became my manager was on one of my loops, and he decided to take a chance on me. And we had conversations years later about it. And he was like, I liked you. I liked you as a person. And you kind of didn't do that great in my interview, but I wanted to take a chance on you. And so it's worked out. I was on the Word team for 3 years-ish. And then I moved over to the Word Online team after that for another 3-ish years. Had 2 kids. And when I came back from having my second child, I moved to the Office Platform Core team. And so I wanted to stretch myself technically and moved over to working on Outlook Mac, developing the Fluid experience. So kind of a couple different connections to the other folks in the group. So yeah, I have a super weird traditional background, a non-traditional background that led me here, and it's a little crazy to reflect on that and be able to kind of do this now.
I love it because it each person's story kind of gives us an idea or a better look at how Microsoft brings in people that are just diverse and diverse in every sense of the word, right? Diverse in background. So I love the story. So give us an idea of some of the technologies that you've touched, currently and maybe leading up to your current position.
Yeah. So when I first joined, I was working on the Word Win32 platform, or the Word Win32 app. So that was in C++. So I went from doing Python scripting most of my senior year in college to C++, which is a huge shift. So learned a ton about memory management in my first year. After I was done with that, when I moved over to the Word web app, I wanted to learn some more, I will say, technically relevant in the new world technologies. And so we moved over to TypeScript. I did a bunch of React work, which was real fun. And then when I shifted this time, I kind of landed myself right back in C++ accidentally. And so I wanted to stretch myself technically to work on Apple platform because that was the one place I hadn't really gone. And so I'm working in mostly Objective-C and C++ and kind of our mix of the two. But I've landed myself right back into the Word code, some of which I wrote when I first started at Microsoft.
Oh, wow.
So
super cool. Super cool.
Yeah.
So my favorite question, Marissa, what is it for you personally that you like most about working for Microsoft?
Yeah, biggest thing absolutely for me is the people and the opportunity to give back to my community. I have had so many opportunities to go back to ASIS, to where I was recruited to recruit other students in the Native community. I have had the opportunity to run giving campaigns 6 out of the 7 years I've been here for my team. I've had lots of opportunities to be able to give people a hand up that I was given throughout my journey here. And so it's been really exciting to be able to mentor folks. I have 3 Explorer interns starting next week that I'm mentoring. So just stuff like that I get to do here that I don't know that I'd be able to do anywhere else.
Love it. And that's been a theme I've heard as well at some of our different events. So we appreciate your insight. Thank you for being one of our panelists. I'll ask you to hang on for our panel discussion. But with that, let me go ahead and introduce our next and I believe final panelist, Rohit Mahale, who's a senior software engineer for Oasis within Microsoft OXO. So Rohit, if you're ready.
Yes, hi. Really excited to be here. Thanks for joining. So for me, yeah, I'm originally from India, come from a small town called Nasik. I grew up there. I did my bachelor's degree also there. After that, I worked for a couple years in India and then came to Florida State for doing master's in computer science. So around that time, like as well as someone learning computer science, Microsoft was a sought after company to work for. So in my last year, I went through the interview loop application and was selected for SDET role. That's something software development engineer in test. So this was 11 years ago. And now I'm part of Oasis team. It's part of OXO Shared, where we have the sub team we own several Azure-based microservices and also an identity component, which Dave kind of explained earlier. So with this, like we power various scenarios across Office applications, across platforms. The important scenarios like sign in, open, saves, documents. So yeah, that's the team I'm part of.
Awesome. So what are some of the technologies that you use on a day-to-day basis as a senior software engineer?
Yeah, technology. So as a language, C# is the primary language we kind of work with. The services we deploy to they run on Azure as a platform, as a service. So we interact with a lot of the tools that Azure provides, Azure portal. There's also another identity component which is a JavaScript component that we in our team release. So we work on TypeScript, JavaScript. There are some Python scripts for specific tools purposes that we write and kind of work on. What I like is it is across the board everywhere. There's the breadth of technologies that we get to use in this team, in this org. That's really good.
Awesome, awesome. So for you personally, what is it that you like so far most about working at Microsoft?
At Microsoft, I'll say impact. Because Microsoft or Office products, they're used by so many people across the world. When we work on a feature in a service, when that feature releases within a day or a week, we get it hits million users. So the impact is huge. And that also means like when things go well, it's for a lot of people use it. When things don't go well, it's also something you have to be careful about. And the experiences like that, you learn from them and get better.
Awesome, awesome, Rohit. So let me thank you as well for being one of our panelists. And we're right about on time to start our panel discussion. And so to our candidates, if you have questions that you would like for me to ask to our panelists, you can start to ask those questions in the chat, but I'm going to kick it off with at least one question for each of our panelists to kind of get the conversation started. But for you to make the most out of this event, please drop your questions in the chat. Try to make them as succinct as possible, because what I'm going to do is, while we're getting some of these initial questions answered, I'm going to be tagging your questions to ask to our panelists as well, so that you guys know this is a live and interactive event. So let's take advantage. Okay, so let's go ahead and kick the discussion off. So all of our Microsoft folks, you guys can go ahead and come on camera. I think I have everyone spotlighted. All right, so I'm going to circle back to Dave for our first question, and it's a cultural question around the Blacks at Microsoft and BOXO, or is it BOXO? Blacks Within Office Experiences Organization. Can you talk a little bit about the role of ERGs, BAM, and then specifically in Office Experiences, the BOXO organization, or ERG?
Yes. So I can speak about what I know of so far. So I've recently have taken over the ownership role of BOXO from Microsoft, and we're going to expand it. Actually, it won't be BOXO. It will be for Office All. So it will be Blacks in Office all up. So we've kind of expanded the scope of that group. And basically what we use ERGs for are to advertise different hiring opportunities, discuss events within the individualized communities, or also discuss events outside of the community that are affecting others that are, that are hurt or disadvantaged, things along those lines. We use them to book speakers that are of interest to folks around the company. We just had one of my favorite rounds of speakers. We were able to get the cast of A Different World in, and that was one of the pivotal things. Dwayne Wayne was my man, to kind of make me kind of go to college. So yeah, so it's a very diverse, that's what all is involved in the ERGs, giving campaigns, volunteering out in the communities. So it's a lot of different opportunities you could take advantage of.
Definitely sounds like a great place to connect with mentors and that kind of thing as well. Awesome. Okay, so next question. I like to sort of do a round robin for everyone that we have here for the benefit of our candidates, right? So I'm going to ask each one of our panelists where you're currently located, and where your team is located, and where you're growing. So if you're growing, I remember Thomas mentioned that he's working remote from St. Louis area, but your team is in mostly in the Atlanta office. So Thomas, are you growing remote, or are you growing in that Atlanta office, or anywhere else as you're looking to hire for your team?
Yeah, so my team directly is primarily based out of Atlanta, and we will be hiring more for the Atlanta office. But as far as Word, like all of Word, We have many people in Redmond, which is in the Seattle area. We also have people in Noida, which is India, and a few people, I believe, in Serbia. And those are like in Ireland. And so outside of those offices, there are a handful of people who are remote, like me.
Awesome. So Harry, where are you working out of currently, and where's your team located and growing?
Yeah, I'm currently working from Redmond. So I am currently in my Redmond office, and then my team is mostly in Redmond as well.
Awesome. Rohit, where's your team currently located? Where are you located, and then where's your team?
I'm also work from Redmond office, and most of my team work in the same Redmond office. So
awesome. Marissa.
I work out of the Redmond office. I live 30 minutes outside of Redmond. Most of my team is in Redmond, but we also have some folks in South America and on the East Coast. So we are actually pretty widespread remote. During COVID, some people left and went home and stayed there. So we're hiring remote or in person or in Redmond.
And then Dave, where are you? I believe you're in the Redmond and Seattle area as well. And then your team,
Yes.
What does that look like?
Most of my team is here located in Redmond, but we do have a couple of folks who are in Atlanta.
Awesome. Okay, so I wanted to give our candidates an idea of what locations are represented, because I know there may be some questions around that. But let me go ahead and get another cultural question in, and this next one I'll pose to Thomas, and that is, and this question goes way back to when we first started doing our very first event, like with Microsoft, and I asked Microsoft to make sure to invite some, African-American professionals, considering the audience of candidates that we brought to the table. And that question was, do you feel that you can be yourself, culturally speaking, as a minority at Microsoft?
Well, the short answer to that question is yes. Like the answer to that question is yes. And in some ways it's a big deal, in some ways it's not, right? So in some ways, yes, I can be myself, because like I kind of blend in the sense that, like, as you can even see with this panel, there are people literally from all over the world, right, who are working on these different teams. And so like now I'm just another person like from the world, right, in the team that I'm in. So in that sense, I feel like I'm a part of the mix of people that I work with. But in other ways, I do stand out, right? Like I'm Black, and that does show up in my work, and it does show up how I move about the world. And the context is different from some other employees, and this week is like a reminder of that. And so where I've seen that kind of come together for me is usually around recruiting and mentoring Black software engineers. For me, that's something I made as a priority in my career over the last 5 years. And on each of the teams that I've been on, I've like asked and negotiated for 10% of my time dedicated to mentoring and recruiting Black engineers. And so like, this is the way that like, I feel like the best of me and the best of Microsoft can come together.
That's awesome. Love it. Thanks, Thomas. Okay, so next question I want to pose to Harry. And Harry, that is, what do you like most about the employee culture and work environment at Microsoft?
The employee culture that I like right now is that I am unafraid to ask questions, and like you have this false notion where if you're principal engineer, like you must have all this wisdom of the world and you know the answer, and that's not the case. Like nobody knows anything, to be honest. And we're all here to learn, and that's the whole growth mindset thing. Like it is very likely sometimes SD1 teaches principal how to do things, and there are times where principal tells to the other, and we should be in a culture of like, don't assume other person knows what they're doing. Like just ask the question, and let's as a team work together and solve these complicated problems. Like the things that we work on do not exist in Stack Overflow. Like you can't just Google and figure out how we're going to fix this technology. So as a team together, we have to be creative and collaborate to get to the right solution. So that's what I value about my team culture.
Love it. Great insight. Okay. All right. So Marissa, so this question has become sort of a common question that we ask at our events, and that is around like the current environment. And you touched on it a little bit about when you mentioned that a lot of folks, when COVID-19 hit, went and worked from home. So how have you seen COVID-19 and how has it affected the way that Microsoft works together and from a work environment perspective?
Yeah, so I have had a very interesting experience with COVID-19 and work from home because my family and my husband's family are back in Chicago. And so we're in Seattle with, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so when COVID started, I had an 11-month-old. And so we have had, there were a ton of growing pains at first to moving to remote. Like my manager beforehand wasn't really into work from home. Like he was like, we need FaceTime. It's better that way. Boy, has he learned because that is just kind of the world we're in now. And there have been a ton of changes, but I truly feel like everyone gets to kind of bring what works for them in a way that we never had before. Like for me, having small kids, not having to commute when I don't want to is A+. Like I have so much more time for the things that I care about more than driving to an office. And I have the flexibility. I could move back home if we want. And so I think that we have seen a ton of folks on my team, on my current team and my old team move through going back home to stay with their family for 6 months to get help with their kids, or go take care of an elderly relative, or there's so much more flexibility now that it doesn't really matter where you are. We have folks who are currently living in South America and it's not a problem. They join our same scrum and we chat when we need to. We have teams that work in India and China, and it is so much easier now to interact with those teams now that we're all on the same page about we're not in person. And so I really think like the inclusivity has been jacked up 10 notches with remote work.
Awesome. Okay, so Rohit, I've got one for you. So I'm gonna ask our first question from the chat. So from one of our candidates, and it's gonna be a 2-part because I think they're related. So one part is from Eric Collins, and the question is: as a professional with C# in my background, would the Office Experience team be the best fit for me? And I'm assuming he means in Microsoft. So whatever your answer would be to that, and then there's another like juxtaposed question around if I don't have C++ in my background, would that sort of preclude me from joining the team?
Yeah, I think, so to answer that, I think C# is a good thing. If you have background working with C# or any similar language, that's always a plus. But when we interview candidates, in general, we kind of look for experience with a similar language, not exactly C#. Like Java, C#, if you see the code side by side, it's very similar. So if you have experience in one language and you have the ability to solve problems, then it is kind of considered that you would, once you are on the job, you will learn the new language and then apply that. So that's yeah. Did that answer the second question as well?
Yeah, I think so. Right. So maybe a little bit of language agnostic, right? So here's my so to our candidates, right? So let's take advantage of this last roughly 20 minutes that we have in the event. To our candidates, you want to drop your questions, try to make them as succinct as possible. Drop them in the chat, and I'm going to do my best to ask those questions rapid fire to our different panelists, and I'll do my best directing those questions to our panelists, to the right panelists as well. But to our panelists, if you guys can help me, if you see a question that you can answer in the chat, feel free to answer those questions as well, because I'm not sure we'll have enough time to get to all of these questions. But let's go ahead and start with the live Q&A. So this first question that I have, or second question I have from the chat, is for Dave, and it's a PM related question. So are there opportunities, and this is actually a common question that we get before and after our events, and that is folks that assume that these events are only for folks that are fresh out of college, right? So the question is, are there opportunities for folks that have 10 plus years of experience as project or program managers there at Microsoft?
Yes, it is. So there we hire at varying different levels. And depends on the level we're hiring, we'll tell you what experiences that we have. So if we're hiring for somebody at a principal level, we generally start that out 8+ years. That's how we usually, kind of state that. I would say to round that up, like 10 years. And so to that question, now, if we're looking for someone at a more junior level, then we hire accordingly. And so, yes, it just depends on the level and the expertise that we're looking for.
Awesome. So yeah, let's keep it rapid fire so we can try to get as many of these questions as possible. So I think this next one is for Harry. And it's from Davies in the chat. How many years of Swift or related experience is required to join Apex? So I don't know if this is for Harry or someone else on the team, but I think it's for Harry.
Yeah, I also want to answer it on the chat, but while it depends on the level, like what we look for as C1, as C2, as like senior. Like we definitely do look at different like language experience that you had previously. Again, I would like to stress that I firmly believe if you're an expert in C++ and like the language really well, like once you master a certain language, it's much easier to transfer that knowledge to the other one. Again, like if you don't master at least one language, like there's a little less hope that there's a lot more learning curve that you have to do to learn Swift or Objective-C, like something like that. But so again, like yes, it'd be great if you have Swift or Objective-C in the background to apply for the Apex Shared. But the more important thing is like, do you at least have one language that you can demonstrate that you have a complete foundational understanding that you can deliver any results in any kind of problem that is thrown at you? I think is the most important thing.
Awesome. Okay, so I see another question here from Malik Warren, and I'm going to open this up to someone on the panel to just volunteer, because this is sort of an open one. So with most of you transitioning to different teams throughout your careers, what advice can you give new hires on adapting to their specific team's culture? So if anyone might volunteer to provide some insight on that one, adapting to your team's culture.
I'll offer my thoughts. So
go ahead, Marissa.
Thanks, Dave. So I've changed teams 3 times, and I think the biggest thing that I've learned over those changes are, yes, you want to adapt to your team culture, but it's more important that you bring yourself. Like there's no one on my team quite like me, and there's no one on my team quite like other folks that work with me. And I think that's what makes our team so unique and so awesome, is that we bring ourselves to that space. And so, yes, you're adapting to the team culture in that here's the way they do things generally, here's how things generally run. But make sure that's not a changing yourself to fit the room, keep bringing your whole self to that.
Awesome. Thomas, did you want to add something to that one?
Yeah, and I will, I guess, give a disclaimer that I am an extrovert. And so one thing I will offer is that, like, get to know people, right? Like there are a lot of teams in the company that try to do their best to like document and to like be clear about cultural aspects of their team or the way of doing things. But sometimes you will only learn by just hearing or observing somebody else doing whatever it is as part of how they do things. So get to know people too.
Awesome. I was going to actually bring this follow-up question to you, Thomas, as well. And this is a question around folks that might not, maybe they don't have the experience yet to get hired on at Microsoft, but they want to be a developer or a software engineer, potentially at Microsoft in the future. So what can they do to become more attractive to a recruiter to potentially land a position at Microsoft if maybe they don't have that software engineering background, but they want to get prepared for an opportunity? And I know Dave has shared some insight once he was already on at Microsoft going into a sweet position, but would love to hear your insight.
So I'll be honest, I'm kind of making this up, right? Like I don't have direct experience with that because y'all heard my story, right? It's not as fun as some of the other ones. But what I will say, especially for somebody who's not coming in straight from college, that I think it's really important that like the technical skills are not the only skills that you bring to the table. So like being able to take initiative, being able to learn, being able to communicate, being able to collaborate and work with other people can be very, very attractive. And there are ways that you can get that experience without writing code. And so as you make your resume or update your LinkedIn page, there are ways that you can make that shine that doesn't, again, have to involve writing features or writing code. Now, that being said, yes, you should write code. So if you can get experiences that'll like enable that, whether it's, I don't know, a side project or taking a class or an internship if it's within reach, depending on your schedule. Just getting some opportunity to write code is important, but I'll be really clear that that's not the only thing that will get you hired.
Awesome. So this is an open question, but I'll default it to Dave. It's a PM related question. Is Microsoft an Agile or Waterfall PM philosophy, or is it program dependent?
It's dependent. I would say adaptable, flexible, iterative. We don't go by one sort of model. It depends on the size of the project, the size of the group. Do you need PM involvement there? Yeah, it depends on the actual project that you're working on. So I wouldn't get hooked on the terms. I would just see and feel out how the team is working, kind of going back to how do you adapt to your team culture, figure out how that team is working. And they may not put a name to it, an official, PMP, Scrum Master and all that stuff, but just kind of pay attention to what's happening there. So yeah, based on the feature, based on the size.
Awesome. Okay, so next question I'm pulling from the chat from Trevor. And so do teams use Microsoft technology products exclusively, or can employees use other technologies such as Bitbucket for source control or PyCharm for coding, for example? So I'll leave this one open to anyone that might want to share some experiences.
I'm smiling so hard, y'all. I have to answer this because I used to get in trouble for this. I didn't use Visual Studio. I use PyCharm all the time when I was coding with Python and I have an app that's actually running as of today. It's called PR Merger, and it's turned into an infrastructure app. Don't know how it got turned into that, but I wrote that totally using PyCharm. No Visual Studio. So I hope that, and I'm talking to you on a Mac, that it dual boots into Windows and Mac OS on the side, because we, as someone explained earlier, Harry, Rohit, Marissa, we are responsible for Office across platforms. So we have to be able to dabble on other platforms and other experiences, so we will know what the user will actually see in the end. That's why I got a Mac, because of my new position. And like, okay, I need to see what these folks are seeing, because like Harry said, I didn't know anything about Mac until I moved into this role. I was strictly on Windows. I had an iPhone, of course, and an iPad, but I never had a MacBook. And so this role has forced me to actually branch out and use these different technologies.
Awesome. So we've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to leave just a couple of minutes for some final remarks as well as some next steps. So what I like to do, this is going a little bit off script, but sometimes we get the best content going off script. So what I like to do is I like to ask each of you, while the candidates have you and this opportunity to speak to you as Microsoft employees and team members on the Office Experiences team, what advice would you give candidates, from you to a candidate, if they ask you, for your advice to help them get their foot in the door at Microsoft? Whether that's an interview, advice for, preparing for an interview, or whatever you'd like to share from your experience on helping a candidate get their foot in the door at Microsoft. So I'm just going to go based on what I see on my screen. Top left is Rohit.
So I think I'll take an example of when someone starts an interview, there's a question in front of you. I think many candidates kind of just take that question as granted. Okay, I have to solve this completely. So there are a couple things. First is like, it's more of a conversation and discussion. So ask clarifying questions. Whatever you don't understand, don't feel bad that you don't know about it. Ask those questions. Anything getting clarified at that point is the best time. So that is one thing I'll give advice, like, and then apply solving it.
Awesome. Marissa, any advice you would have for our candidates?
Yeah, network. Like, you can meet people through all sorts of different areas. NSBE, ACES, NSBE is National Society for Black Engineers, ACES, all sorts of different, there's so many different paths. You do not have to go the traditional path and meet people, talk to different people.
Network. Awesome. Thanks, Marissa. Thomas, any advice you would offer to our candidates?
So I have noticed that in the time from when I interviewed for this job coming out of college till now, there's been so much emphasis on prep, right? Like, I got to spend 80 hours a week on leak code, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. So what I want to just offer people is, like, have fun, find a way to make it fun, right? Like, I don't want to tell you to not prepare for the interview, but don't burn yourself out before you even get to the front door, right? Like, find ways to make it engaging and exciting. If there are other people that are interested in the same thing, find ways to connect with other people and practice together. But whatever you do, make it fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. Harry, any advice you might offer to our candidates?
I think on the resume front, if you can be clearly demonstrate your technical passion and like what results you have actually demonstrated, that like whatever internship or projects that you've done, like what were the results after your work? Like when I talk to, even for my people, like, you know, there's a difference between activity and impact. And like, so don't talk about activity, talk about the impact that you had. And like, the more you can clearly talk about the impact, the more I will be wowed by your resume and the more likely that I will want to talk to you. So like, you don't have to make the resumes long. The resumes can be very short, but if you can land that impact as much as you can, I think that will really get yourself foot in the door.
Awesome. And so that leaves us to Dave. So Dave, as our keynote as well, I'll give you kind of the final word before I talk about next steps for our candidates.
Okay. So I would say thank everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it. Really is great to see the HBCU community coming together. As being an HBCU graduate, it's a great place to be. I enjoyed my time being a member of, well, I will always be an HBCU member. So what I would part and say, just don't give up. At the darkest time, just don't give up. Don't give up. And find inspiration and a spark in anything. Like Thomas said, find your joy, because you can, as he said, over prepare. You know, you don't want to under prepare, but don't make yourself so nervous where you talk yourself out of it. Also, as you go through these interviews or are aware of opportunities, show your uniqueness in that interview, because you may not know the code part, but you have a uniqueness where you have a go-getter attitude, or they say, hey, he is willing to learn, or she, or, you know, all of the terms that they're willing to learn. And so, like I say, just don't give up. There's, you know, lots of inspirational stories told here today. Marissa, Harry, Rohit, everyone else, stay passionate, stay on that road. Remember, when you look at this, and everyone in the HBC community knows this, it's gonna be a little more about you. It's not supposed to be that way, but it is the world and the reality which we live in. So as you go about doing that, it takes each one to teach one. Like my man KRS-One said, yes, I'm a Generation X. Everything for me was a key and go look at TV when you came home. So all of my stuff is about that. So just stay focused, stay on that path, stay resilient, and keep on keeping on.
Love it. Thank you, Dave. So what I want to do with this last minute is I want to thank the Microsoft folks for making this event possible. Thanks to all of our panelists and to our candidates. I'd like to thank you as well and give you some next steps. All right. So I saw a lot of questions coming in from folks that had a PM background. We saw a lot of questions coming from folks with a software engineering background. So the focus of this event and the consumption post-event is primarily for software engineers, but I know we always have folks that are interested in the PM opportunities. So I'm gonna have two courses of action for you. One make sure you send us your latest resume, which you can send to hbcuconnect.com/Microsoft/OXO. So that's the first course of action. Make sure we have your latest resume. We're going to take the resumes, sort them out, and send them over to the team at Microsoft, who is going to be looking primarily for software engineering talent to reach out to align for interviews. However, to all of the folks that have interest in the PM opportunities, I'm going to encourage you to go to the Microsoft website, look up the opportunities within the OXO organization or the Office Experiences organization, and apply online. Because from our events, we've had folks that have been hired not only from submitting their resume to us and interviews being aligned that way, but we have 100% have folks get hired and even have come on as panelists that went the other route of going to the website, finding the opportunities that were a good fit for their background, and then applying online. All right. So Microsoft's going to get your resume through us either way. But if you're really excited about the opportunities, be proactive. Go ahead and find the opportunity that fits your background and apply online. And then we will also share your resumes with the Microsoft team. And then they will be reaching out primarily, like I said, to software engineering candidates. But we've also had some folks that have been reached out to as the list gets propagated to different teams as well for other opportunities. So, but we want to thank you all for making this event possible. Without you all attending on both sides, the Microsoft side and HBCU Connect member side, this event would not be possible. So I'd like to thank all of you and really say we appreciate it. We will follow up with an email with those same instructions, as well as the video from this event once it is ready. So thanks, everyone. If we have any folks that want to do a photo op, now's your chance to go ahead and turn on your camera. If you got dressed to impress, that kind of thing, go ahead and turn your camera on, and we'll get some last screenshots before we head out. So go ahead and do that. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to unspotlight folks so we can kind of get our entire group here. And I'll get a couple of screenshots of your smiling faces. So give me 5 seconds. It's one of my favorite parts of the event, just to get to see those smiling faces. But as you guys can see, the Microsoft team is awesome. Very serious about diversity. We've had lots of folks that have been hired from these events. So you all are in the right place at the right time, like I said. So let's go ahead and do the 1, 2, 3 cheese. All right, so 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. Look out for an email coming from HBCU Connect. Touch up your resume, get it back over to us on the site, and we'll share that with the Microsoft team. So thanks everyone for joining us, and look forward to some success stories that we can share as well. Take care.